All right.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Woo!
We are excited to be here with you today. Welcome to the Ancestors of Pedagogical Greatness panel. Round two, welcome. We are excited to be here. All right. We have a wonderful group of educators here. We have a combined experience of over 80 years in education, and we have experiences ranging from teaching to administration to athletics to PVA to multilingual to SPED to RTI to professional development. So we bring in a whole lot of experience, but we are here as educators and we are talking as educators with you today. Let's meet our panel. We have Marie Mendoza. We have Taylor Gilly. We have Monet Bean. We have Tia Simmons. We have Brandy Rodney. And we have Shayna Johnson. And I'm your co-host, Jamie Elizami, and it is my honor to introduce you to our host for this evening, mom of two boys and 2+ ish cats, a lifelong learner and educator and author of The 7 Traits of Talented Teachers, Akira M. LeBlanc.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you so much, our awesome co-host, Jamie. I want to be very clear about that because she is awesome, everybody. And thank you so much to our amazing panelists who are here today. They are each experts in their own right in the field of education, amazing women who I have all known for some time. And so I feel absolutely confident in their ability to be able to share their knowledge with you on today. So thank you so much again, Jamie, for that warm welcome and opening. And I'm ready to get going here, all right? So with that, I do want to take a moment to remind our audience that you are a part of this panel. Nicole, our awesome chat moderator, our DJ Nicole, is going to be monitoring the comment section. And so we want you guys to make sure that you go in, that you put questions there. We are live. And so your questions and your comments we can address in today's panel. And just like before, anything that we are unable to address in today's panel, we will follow up on the 7 Traits of Talented Teacher page to make sure that we give you guys the information that you are looking for, because this is for you, our educators across the globe. We are here to encourage you, to motivate you, to provide you with strategies and expertise, but we want to hear your voice in this because we know that you guys are bringing the real to the table, okay? So definitely make sure that you take a moment to chime in. So with that, today's panel discussion centers on student culture and biography and how we as educators weave that into classroom instruction. How we as educators purposefully weave and attend to students' individual cultures, students' individual biographies. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and continue with our same routine. I'm going to open up with a few excerpts from the book, The 7 Traits of Talented Teachers, okay? And so first, I am going to head over to page 32, and I'll be reading 3 excerpts today from the book for you, 3 paragraphs, if you will, okay? So our first one, bottom of page 32. Talented teachers know that while it may not be characteristic of their students to readily engage in discussions around their cultural beliefs or even their personal biographies, those beliefs and biographies exist. Not only do they exist, but they also inform students' perceptions of their educational climate. They influence students' school-based relationships with administrators, teachers, and other students. They weigh in heavily on how a student will ultimately academically and societally achieve. Okay, so that's our first quote. Our next excerpt is at the bottom of page 33, about 8 lines from the bottom. Teachers with this trait pose thoughtful questions that prompt students to compare and contrast their unique cultural and biographical understandings with the subject area content. They challenge students to address the gaps and the inequitable representations of the content that feeds into single story narratives of diverse groups, such as those of people of color. They push students to read beyond the static words on the textbook page. In the room of these educators, students weave their identities and their life experiences into the content. As a result, the cultural environment of the classroom is enriched, students feel valued, and learning flourishes. So one more excerpt, we're going to head over to page 40, and it'll be the last paragraph, starting about midways up. A teacher's aim to understand his student's background and integrate that knowledge into the scheme of learning does not need to be a production. In truth, it is so much more about simply being human. Education, like life, does not occur within a static space. Rather, it occurs within the fluidity of life, ever changing, ever evolving. Educators who determine to be integrators of culture and student biography must recognize that our students, much like ourselves, are both contributors to and recipients of the teaching and learning that occurs in our classrooms. Richly complex human beings, our students offer to us the profundity of their lives, canvases full of color and depth. As we educate, we must integrate the artistry of their design into the object of knowledge, whatever it may be. In doing so, we awaken in them the truth about who they are and why they matter. All right, so with that, setting the stage for us, we are going to go ahead and begin today's panel, okay? And so at this time, I'm gonna hand it over to Jamie, and Jamie, if you give me a moment, I'm gonna go ahead and put the question up on the screen for our panel as well as our viewers.
Mm-hmm. Definitely powerful words there, Kira. Anytime we're building relationships and talking about culture, there definitely has to be some give and take, and there has to be opportunity to speak to culture and who we are as teachers, and of course who students are with each other. So with that, we are going to start with a foundational question just on culture as we lead our conversation on interweaving culture and student biography into the classroom. So panel, we're excited to get started and hear your expertise. Question number one. How do you define culture, and what impact does cultural relevance have on student learning and achievement? And as a good teacher, I'm going to repeat that. How do you define culture, and what impact does cultural relevance have on student learning and achievement?
And typically, people define culture as simply how we do what we do. And the teacher has a moral and professional obligation to establish a sound and safe culture in his or her classroom. A part of establishing that culture in the classroom is ensuring that the students are able to see themselves in the learning. And that is a great impact because it changes the dynamics and the reception of the learning for that student. It makes them more open to what the knowledge is you are sharing with them and helps them to internalize it because they see themselves in it.
Thank you, Tia. Monet, I see you want to add to that?
Sure. So culture to me was and is all about creating, echoing that, an environment where learners, professionals, or students know that they're welcome, they're cared for, they're advocated for, and that they're safe. And so that advocacy and safety is so key when thinking about diverse learners. So having diverse learners, whether that is culturally diverse intellectual capacities, and establishing a culture where they know you as the educator have their best interests, even if and when they fail, because there will be moments of failure, right? Learners and professionals will work harder for you because there is a culture of safety, of trust. And so they're more apt to try different approaches, given their all, even when the stakes are high. And so that's an aspect of culture for me, all of that.
And if I may,
go ahead.
And if I may add to that, I think, when a student understands that you understand them, then you have won the battle right there. You have won not only their ears, but you have inclined them to listen to what you have to say, because they start to tune in. They're like, wait a minute, she understands who I am and where I'm from. So then they understand that you can relate, like you understand them, even if you haven't gone through it yourself. They are surprised in knowing that, wait a minute, this is a teacher, but you know what? We also show them that we are just not teachers. We're human as well, and we may have had some of those same cultural experiences that they may have had, or we probably didn't experience it personally, but we also we have to come to the realization that, you know what? In order for me to reach this baby or this child, I have to let them know that I know where you're coming from. I know who you are, and I can relate to that. This is what it is. And so we have to meet them where they are, right? To bring them where they need to be. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Students need to know that you care about them before they care about what you're teaching. Brandy, I see you want to add to that?
Yes, I definitely agree with what all the panelists have stated. And hearing was, you're vulnerable. It's a space where you have to accept that you don't know something that you're expected to know. And so when you're talking about achievement, those are students who are confident. When they're not confident, they don't have the push that allows them to take a risk, to ask a question. And when you establish a relationship between you and your students, then there is that comfort level, and they are going to go out on a limb and ask a question. Everyone in the classroom will understand that you may have the wrong answer, but you're going to leave with the right one, because we're here to learn. And so learning is a vulnerable sport. And so you have to have something that's like a safety net, and that is that relationship that we all know is like education 101. You must build relationships between yourself and your student. So I love the question. Love it.
Absolutely. And I think like what you said about modeling as a teacher, of being vulnerable, and as a teacher, making mistakes or admitting to when you had some kind of error or fault is absolutely so important. Marie, I see you'd like to add to that as well.
Yes, and to continue with that thought pattern, I think the other piece that we must be mindful of is culture involves social behaviors and norms. So as a teacher, as an educator in the classroom, what am I doing to establish the environment in which students feel, as Brandy was saying, they can be vulnerable, they can ask those questions, but it's up to us to kind of structure that so that students put themselves at ease. And we think about the affective filter, particularly with students of diverse backgrounds who are in our classrooms. We really need to think, now this is, school, middle class norms. Are the students who are sitting in my classroom aware of the norms as they are established in a US school, for example? So all of those pieces need to be thought about as we are considering what is culture, how am I establishing the norms and the social behaviors, what's acceptable in this classroom, and how am I being inclusive so that students feel that they can be vulnerable, ask those questions, and raise their hand when they don't understand something.
Thank you, everyone. At this time, I would like to turn to Nicole to see if we have any questions from our audience.
So we don't have questions yet. We're getting some more people logging on though, and starting to talk in the chat. A lot of likes and loves coming our way. So keep it up, panelists. Great job.
Good deal. So, let me tell you something. Wow, that's a book, what everybody just said just now. Honestly, when we talk about student culture, just to tie together everything you guys said, there has to be a cognizance, right, on the part of us as educators. So we have to be cognizant that culture exists. And it has to be a mindset where you you know, okay, in the classroom or in school, there's a culture here, but people also come, our students also come with a culture that they are bringing to the table. And if we don't think that way, if we don't think that there's a culture that exists, then it's easy for us to bypass it. It's easy for us to not do all of the things that you ladies just got finished saying needs to happen, right? And it's easy to not have that awareness and to just go forward with the content. But the relevance piece is so important, because if what we're teaching is not culturally relevant, then what we've learned about the brain is that it doesn't stick. It's not going to stay, right? What we've learned about the brain is that the brain needs, when it takes in new information, it wants to attach itself to something that's already there. And so for us to be cognizant, as all of you ladies have skillfully articulated, when we're cognizant of that as educators, then we know we're going to teach better. They're going to learn better when we say, yes, my students have cultures that I need to acknowledge in the learning. So just excellent, excellent. Tia, I saw you had something else to add to that.
I was just thinking when you were speaking about cultural relevance, it is not only critical that we interweave cultural relevance into the learning, but we have to be mindful that we are not culturally assaultive. I'm recalling an experience with a young lady who, in her culture, it was considered disrespectful to look an adult eye to eye. However, her teacher was in constant battle with her, writing referrals and sending her out of the classroom, saying she was disrespectful. I'm talking to you, look at me when I'm talking to you. And so in my mind, those are culturally assaultive behaviors. And so we have to, they come hand in hand. And so we have to extend our conversation as educators to make sure we are not being culturally assaultive.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I wrote that down. I wrote down vulnerable sport, you know, as well, because that's education as a vulnerable sport. You know what I mean? Those are things that are important for us to think about, even down to planning our lessons, right? When we do that, we should be thinking about these kinds of things. Marie, I think I saw your hand. Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on that piece as well. I think as systems, educational systems, we need to be mindful of cultural relevance, cultural competence, and somewhere in our professional learning opportunities, we weave this in so that it's not just algebra or geometry or what that piece, but it's also how am I interacting with my students or with my staff that may have a different culture than I do, or maybe a perceived same culture, but it could be different. And we are mindful of the way we are moving about this whole notion of education. What is education? It is more than the book piece. It is also being intellectually stimulated by those who think and act differently than we do. So.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that, Marie. Excellent points on that. I'm going to go to Taylor, then Shayna, then Monet, and then we'll go ahead and start on the next question after you three ladies.
As a white educator in predominantly diverse environments, through a lot of self-reflection and mentoring, I think it is so important that our white educators in urban schools realize the dominant culture that they bring to a classroom and really trying to rein that in and letting our space be more student-centered and taking ourselves out of it. So what do we see that our students need? It's not about me anymore, right? What does my bookshelf look like? What do the videos look like that I'm showing my students? Because I should not bring my dominant culture into the classroom, regardless of what my students look like, because that's everywhere, right? And we need to change that. We need to change that narrative, because that's not what America is anymore. So I think it's super important for there needs to be a lot of soul searching, and there needs to be a lot of mentoring in cultural spaces where white educators can kind of turn the table themselves and really dig into the culture of the schools and the communities where they're teaching.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for bringing that perspective, Taylor, and really being able to speak to that. Because when you talk about the dominant culture, we know that that's what's led education, right, for a long time. And so, again, to what you said, the demographic, our student population has drastically shifted now, right, from where we started. And so we have to change as a result of that, right? So thank you so much for that. Shayna?
Yes, the point that I want to make is we have to understand that we are not deviating from the content when we take the time to understand and to learn our students' culture. Because some of us as educators, we feel like, no, I was hired to teach, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I was hired to teach, I'm a band director, so I was hired to teach music. It's not my job to take the time to understand who my students are. They need to understand this content. How many of us have run into educators that feel like that is unnecessary to the content. But if we want to convey and if we want to reach our kids in a manner in which we need to reach them, then we need to take the time to learn them. That is a part of the content, and that is a part of education. So I often, oftentimes I hear that. I hear that a lot, but where our students are from and their culture is very important to them. So if it is important to them, it is important to us. So we have to we have to embrace that. And we have to humble ourselves enough to get off our ego to where this is my class. No, it's not. It's their class. Because especially those of us who are teaching in Title I schools, everything we have is because of them. And so it's theirs. And so we teach them how to take care of it. But their culture, it has to be important to us. We have to know how to deal with our kids. And we have to let them know that, hey, where you're from is important. And we also have to understand that it is not up to us to change their culture. Their culture is what it is. And we're going to embrace it for what it is. And we're not going to make them feel like their culture is wrong, neither right, but it is what it is. And it's awesome. I heard the other point. I forget who made the point. They said that when the student comes in, they may come in with the wrong answer, but they leave out with the right one. I said, my goodness, I love that, because when we are trying to, I'm asking a question, right? And I have the kids are giving me feedback, and the first answer may be way left field, right? But I don't dismiss it. When we arrive, like I may ask a question, the kids may say, well, it's this or that. And I say, well, listen, once we arrive to the right answer, I acknowledge that wrong answer that was way left field. I said, listen, y'all, Tasha started out with this one. She got the ball rolling, and guess what? We ended up at our destination. So we made that environment safe and conducive for learning. So, okay, I'm gonna stop now.
I know I'm not the only one who want to get up out their chair and run through this house, but I know some of us might not be all right from the bottom. But I saw Preach in the chat. I saw Tia, I think it was, said we teach students, not topics. Wow, doesn't that captures what Shayna was saying and said so well. Oh, I'm so glad you my sister. All right, so with that, I think Monet was up next, and then we're gonna switch questions. Go ahead, Monet.
What, Shayna? That's a hard. That was a hard comment to follow behind. I had to write down because you and Marie, and really Shayna, you took a lot of what I was going to say out and said it so well. But if I could sum up that, it's consideration. It's not about us. It's about them, like you mentioned. And teachers, educators, we have to be considerate of their cultures and what their needs are and adapt that into the instruction. And so, Marie, I think too, you mentioned how, teachers think it's so difficult, right? It's another thing. We know teachers say it's another thing, but it's not me teaching culture or learning culture and then teaching the content. It's how can I interweave aspects of culture into the content, or how can I bring things that you value, things that you believe. If you like football and I'm teaching math, let me figure out a way to include that into the question. So it's not going above and beyond to like research, and you know, although it's imperative to know and research, but you aren't having to create a dissertation, right? It's just being considerate. And so if I could sum that up, as educators, we need to be considerate.
Excellent. And Monet, hearing you say that brings me back to in the book where it talks about it's not a production, right? Bringing in culture, acknowledging student biography is not a production, or like you said, Monet, it's not a dissertation. Like Shayna said, this is not something else. This is a part of what we do. The problem is it feels like something else when we've been going for decades not doing it, right? When we've been going for all this time in public education, not acknowledging student culture, and now, oh, it feels like they're asking me to do something else. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is we're saying, let's turn human again. Let's acknowledge where everyone is in this classroom and understand that that is very much a part of their learning experience. Okay, with that, we are actually not going to go to the next question. We're going to go to our segments. Shall you better? And so for this segment, everyone will turn their microphones on. We're going to get noisy, all right, for a moment, because we want to hear the clapping and the amening and the everything else that comes along with that. So for the segment, Shall You Better, hold on one second. Let me go ahead and get this up on the screen. All right, so everyone can see their sentence frame for Shall You Better. And here we go. All right, so we're gonna have Taylor to start us off with her statement about Shall You Better. Taylor,
yeah, and you said that it could go, like I could go out to someone, right? Or I could tell who it's for. Okay.
Yes,
so
you can.
In a theme here for the white teacher in urban diverse schools. You want to be a talented teacher, child, you better find yourself a culturally responsive mentor so you can ask the hard questions and get that tough feedback.
Yeah, necessary.
Wow, that's big. That's big. That's big right there.
Everybody
that's big.
Needs somebody.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Everybody needs somebody. That's right. Look, find the right person.
Yeah.
Find the right person.
Right mentor.
Right. All right. So next up is Marie.
Woo!
Woo!
If you
All right,
want
Marie.
okay, here we go. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
If you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better give yourself permission to self-reflect and self-correct when it comes to culture.
All right.
Self-reflect and self-correct. So get it right. Don't stay there. Don't stay wrong.
Yeah, you got to play your part. Play your part.
All right. Shall Monet.
If you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better recognize that times are different, and so are these kids. You better go in knowing that and adapt, or you gonna struggle.
Okay. All right. She said you gotta go. She said recognize.
Right.
All right. All right, Jamie, go ahead and close it out for us.
All right. If you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better show up. You better show up to class. You better show up to baseball games. You better show up to dance recitals. You better show up to choir concerts. I don't even know what they're called. You better show up to dinners. You better show up to barbecues.
Watch you
You
there.
better social distance and wear your mask and wash your hands. But you
They watch you there.
Yes.
Yay.
You better be at the barbecue, at the baseball game, and at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice, nice. Well done, ladies. Those were absolute nuggets, absolute treasures. Beautiful. Thank you for your version of Child You Better. All right, so with that, we are now going to jump into our next question. So everybody can go ahead and mute back again if you haven't already. All right, and so now we begin our next question, and I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share so everyone can see it. Okay. All right, so now we want to get a little bit more specific in our discourse now, right? I'm an educator. Okay, I've heard all of this, theory. I've heard the importance of it, but tell me how to do it, right? Tell me what you want me to do, right? And so that's what this question is about. And so to our panel, the question goes, name elements of the classroom environment that must be established to ensure culturally relevant lessons and activities are effective. What have you done to achieve this? And I'm going to follow Jamie's lead and read this one more time. Name elements of the classroom environment that must be established to ensure culturally relevant lessons and activities are effective. What have you done to achieve this? All right, going to go ahead and open up the floor to our panel.
So I want to take this approach. It's imperative to plan for our learners. As I've listened in on planning sessions, and even as I think back to my classroom days, there wasn't much talk in the planning session or consideration for our learners, our special education learners, our gifted learners, language learners, or whatever else learners. So before we can even get to the classroom, we need to talk about normalizing conversations and planning about culture, about diverse students, about the biography of our classes, because that impacts everything in the environment. It impacts behavior, instruction, student processing. And so I recall always pushing, I was that person. I was pushing saying, well, what about these learners? I serve the EO population, or how will this work? Or what will this look like? We have to, as educators, we have to speak up, because no one else is if we don't, right? So we have to consider that meeting the needs of just the general education learners is not enough, or even the ways we approach meeting general ed learners sometimes is not enough. And so I guess, what have I done to achieve this, or what do I suggest? Speak up often, consistently, and then don't back down until it's normal. And so, yeah.
Good stuff, Monet. And just to pull kind of a big point out of there, so I'm hearing you say planning, right? In the planning, that's going to be one of the first things that I can do as an educator to start figuring out, how do I address culture and biography in my classroom? How do I weave that into the learning? And so that has to start at planning. That doesn't start once the bell has rung, right? And now I want to start just thinking about it then and there. I need to be thinking about it in advance, right? And I saw someone
show up in the classroom and it's there, right? You
Right.
have to think about it. And it should be a norm, like Marie mentioned, that these are things that we're going to talk about so that we can ensure that we are implementing this in the classroom, or we have a shared, or like Taylor mentioned, I have a mentor, or I'm having conversations with other team members on what this is going to look like in the classroom before I get there.
Correct. That's excellent. I mean, that's excellent, because that's really taking it from the start right there. Beautiful. Okay, we got a lot of hands up. I don't know whose hand was first. I'm going to go Marie, Brandy, Shayna, Taylor. I'm going in the order you guys are on my screen. Okay, go ahead, Marie.
I'm just going to follow up with what Monet was talking about in terms of the planning piece. And even before we plan our lesson, we need to go in and know who our students are. And I don't just mean, from the last teacher, what they told me in the hallway about this student from last year or the year before, but really going back and looking historically at where have they been successful, where have they struggled, and how, if any impact their culture has had on this. Because sometimes we have this culture of failure that develops for certain students, and I want to be mindful of that, in addition to building in, as Monique was talking about in the planning pieces, support systems from the start. So we're not going to wait until they fail. We're going to catch them before they fail because we look historically at how they have performed. Where have they been successful? Where have they struggled? And then thinking about what are their instructional needs. That's more than just walking in the room and saying, okay, this teacher said you're going good luck with this one because they've always been a fill in the blank. We need to look historically at their performance and then see them as people, right? See them as people, because sometimes we have this learned helplessness because they have failed for so long. So how do we shift themselves? How do we help them shift the way they see themselves as learners as we're planning for them?
Yeah, this is exciting because again, you guys are the experts, right? And so as experts, you are really taking it to the origins. You're saying, look, I know we're talking about what's the elements in the classroom, but for us to make that happen, there's some things that have to happen behind the scenes. There's some things that have to happen before we even make it to the classroom, right? And so Monet with the planning, and then Marie saying, okay, but you can't plan if you don't know the kids. So you need to start understanding who your students are as well. Ask questions about them, learn about them, call the parents, have a conversation, right? Because we can learn a lot that way just from exploring and trying to understand who our kids are. That's excellent, ladies. I think Brandy was up next.
Yeah, so once we left PLC and we have the activities planned out and we looked in whatever database, Eduforia, this, that, schooling, wherever you got your information, now in your classroom that teaches students that their voice is important. So there are structures in whole group discussions. You have to honor something your teammate said before you can add your component. You build a culture in your classroom that promotes student choice, that promotes student-centered learning, begin to see themselves in the learning, and they can have opportunities to bring in their funds of knowledge. That's the knowledge I have from my everyday life. Wow. So my experiences have a space in physics, really. And so when you create a culture that supports the student, that welcomes them to bring themselves in, then you are establishing culture and you are indirectly saying that I see you. I want you to be a part of this classroom and I can't wait to teach and learn with you for the school year. And that's an indirect message that's sent by the structures, these specific academic behaviors you expect for them to use, the way that they interact with one another. It's your learning environment. The board, the data wall, where we're celebrating success. And just making sure that, from a threshold to the do now, how we talk, that's a little phrase, all of that is purposeful and structured so students know what to expect. If students know what to expect, then now they trust their teacher. It's very important for us to establish culture when we understand the impact that it has on our students.
So when someone is preaching when they freeze 3 times and you still understand what they were saying, right? So that's when some truth is being spoken there. Well said, Brandy. You were tapping all on my child, you better, so I'm not going to say anything else about what you just said right now. So we're going to go to Shayna. I think, I'm not sure if it was Shayna had her hand up or it was Taylor. I think I see Taylor's hand, so we're going to go to Taylor.
Okay. I made sure that, piggybacking off what Brandy said a little bit, opening up that classroom culture, opening up that, somebody else said, safe space to where we can just all be together and be ourselves. So my name is Miss Gilly and I like books and arts and crafts, and Harry Potter sets my soul on fire, and I will trip over air this year in this classroom, and we're going to laugh about it and move on. So that's who I am. Who are you? And I made sure that I also had spaces where my students could share of themselves in safe ways if they weren't ready to talk to me yet or to another classmate. So I had kind of like a comment box. It was actually a piggy bank from Walmart. It's like $5. And they would put little notes in it and sign them just about themselves, or if they were having trouble with a specific subject and didn't want to speak to me directly yet at the beginning of the year. And for example, I had a male student who said, he was just sharing. He just said, I am really great at doing hair, and my sisters make fun of me for that. So I got to pull him to the side and say, I just want you to know that my hairdresser is male. He owns his own salon and charges no less than $200 for this mess. So keep doing what you're doing, honey, because it's a good thing. So I opened these spaces so that we could just all be ourselves and trip and fall and get the answers wrong and support each other and raise each other's up and just figure out who we are together. But I had to make sure that I shared that part of myself too, that I had to be my authentic Taylor for them so that they knew it was safe to do that.
Authenticity. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the trip over air. I love it because I probably did too. But to be able to share that with your students early on is very disarming and shows them, hey, look, we're open here, right? We're in this together. Tia, I see your hand up.
Well, in alignment with what some of the other panelists are saying, it's critical that we also structure the space so that there's student voice. And we all say that representation matters, but it too matters in the classroom, that they are able to have a voice in the learning, that we give them ownership in the learning. And someone else mentioned student-centered learning, but there's also a need for the space for student-led learning. And then we cannot forget the efficacy, that we have to speak achievement and success over the babies that sit before us day to day. We have to speak success into their futures, just like Taylor was just sharing. And the power of an educator's voice to the learner is one of the strongest voices they will hear. And so it's our responsibility to build capacity and teach them how to use their voice, even if it's in the classroom with structured and healthy discourse. We have to remove ourselves enough to be comfortable with the student-led learning and with the discourse.
Yeah, that's excellent. Definitely, again, pointing out the student-centered, but then bridging, right? Now, okay, it's not just your voice I want to hear coming back. I want to hear your voice actually leading the conversation as well, because that we're going to get a whole lot of student biography and student culture when we open up the space for our kids just to be able to talk, just to be able to articulate themselves in the midst of the learning. Okay, I know we have a couple more hands up, so we still have one more question we want to get to, and then we got to get back to our audience. So I'm going to go Jamie, then Marie, and then we will go to Nicole from that point for the audience.
This very much touches on what Tia just said. I think a lot of the other group members mentioned. You have to have elements of your students in your room, whether that is pictures of your students, whether that is student work, whether that is, hey, there's a football game going on this week, whether that is, hey, here's your students of the week over here. Something that I really enjoyed doing with my kids at the beginning of the year, I have them to actually make a business card. So whatever you're going to do in your future, whatever your goal is, you are making this wonderful business card, and allow the whole class to learn about each other and what, our goals and what we want to do. And I will post them on the door. So the first thing they see when they walk into my classroom is, this is what I'm trying to do. And, it was especially nice to have it at the beginning of the year, because it helped me to plan. It helped me to know, hey, this is how I can pull in these students, because this is how it's going to make it relevant, to them. And then also, kids have bad days, just like adults have bad days. So if a kid was struggling, it was very easy to be like, look, you said you wanted to be a dentist. I have on my door, you're going to be a dentist. You told this classroom you were going to be a dentist. It is my job to get you back on track to be able to do that, and to lead some of those motivating conversations. So students will tell you, what their culture is, what they need, how you can motivate them. You just have to give them an opportunity to do so.
Right, excellent. And Jamie knows that I am in love with that idea because we both, as educators, did different versions of that for our students. And again, like she said, the misbehavior happens, the off-task behavior happens. Instead of it being, I'm going to write you up, instead of it being, you're in trouble, it's simply a time to remind our kids of the goals that they've established for themselves, right? And often that is enough, right? That's enough. Okay, beautiful. And I got you, Marie, on that. And so now I'm going to go ahead and go to Nicole to touch base on anything that might be happening in our comment section.
Okay, so we have a lot of love still coming in, and one of the comments I want to highlight was from Miss Atlee, who shared that the type of knowledge that we're all discussing is that knowledge that doesn't just come from a book. So, and obviously we talked about all the years combined that we have, and I know she appreciated that as well as a lot of the other comments that we have coming in. We had an earlier question from Mr. Wilson that you guys have already really answered, but I wanted to at least point it out. He wanted to know what we felt the importance was of having a culture specific to the classroom, which is what we've been talking about. And so I wanted to reiterate what was said about not only that culture of student-centered learning, but then again, bridging it or building it into student-led learning, and how that in itself is a culture that we should create in all of our classrooms. So again, more love coming in. You guys are doing awesome.
Awesome, thank you. And that culture, the one you just spoke about, that culture is built from the multitude of cultures in the room, right? It is a rich tapestry of all the biographies and all the cultures that populate our classroom. Excellent. Great question. Thank you. Thank you, audience. And we are still here if you need us, so definitely chime in. All right. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Jamie, who I think is going to start another segment for us.
Yes, we are going into our second and final segment of Child, You Better. I'll let Kira get the sentence stem up as a good teacher. And just to give you a heads up, Shayna, you're going up first. Oh, and mic's on, everyone, please. Mic's on, everyone.
Woo!
All right.
You just let me know. Do I need to jump in now? Just go on ahead.
Are you ready?
Oh, I am sorry.
Let's go.
Okay, so if you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better listen, forgive, and know your students.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Wow. That forgive, that's big, right?
Yeah.
Like what
I'm
happened
telling you.
today? Oh, that doesn't carry over into the next day and the next day. What happens in the day stays in the day. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That is simple, but so powerful. Kira, you are up next.
All right. So let me stop sharing here. Okay. If you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better purposefully plan spaces for student discourse in every lesson. In every lesson, we need to let our, I'm not explaining. Okay, go ahead.
No explanation. And on that note, you are up next.
So one of the mantras that I live by is James Baldwin, for these are all of our children, and we will either pay or profit from what they become. So if you don't want to be a talented teacher, child, you better understand your profit margin.
Ma'am.
That is real.
Invest.
That is real. Nicole, you are
That's
up next.
nice.
All right, if you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better get to know your students on a deeper level and believe in the value that their differences bring to your classroom.
Wow.
That's a good one.
That's it. That's it. Dive deep. Dive deep, deeper than the surface.
And Brandy, you are going to close us off of this segment.
All right, so if you want to be a talented teacher, child, you better understand that it is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Drop the mic.
Yes.
This is
Just
true.
fix it.
Just fix it.
Yes.
It don't matter who broke it. It don't matter who broke it.
Just fix it. As everyone turns their mics back off, and as Kira brings up the next question, I do want to just add to that. Brandy, you know, in thinking of leadership, you know, thinking of teacher to student, coach to athlete, principal to teacher, if you are the leader, it is your job to fix it. If something goes wrong, even if it wasn't your fault, like you said, you are still the one responsible to fix it. And like Tia said about our profit margins, it's in your best interest that you fix it. You're gonna have a much better life, much better outlook if you do so, and better profit margins. So keep that in mind. And the final question for today for our panel is, in virtual and or face-to-face settings, how can educators monitor their personal biases and honor cultural sensitivities when planning and designing activities that incorporate cultural references? Again, in virtual and or face-to-face settings, how can educators monitor their personal biases and honor cultural sensitivities when planning and designing activities that incorporate cultural references?
When I was in university, okay, I was studying psychology, and I took some education courses. And I had a professor tell me, teaching or education is not it's not about trying to make sure that you check your biases at the door. You have to remember personally, what is your why? Why are you doing this? What's driving you? What's motivating you to be in front of people and work to change their thought processes and their beliefs? Those are different. And so we have to understand what our why is, because if we're just coming to do a job, then issues of impatience, frustration, and just uncertainty is going to take you under. And so if we understand how am I connected to this person? What do I have in common with him or her? Do we both have sisters? Do we both have brothers? Do we both grow up in a single home? Do we both have, trips that we take away? Do we both like pizza? I mean, just personal basic understandings of their culture or the color of their skin as the way that you want to connect with them, or you think that you can't connect with them. It's about the personal connection that you have with people.
Absolutely. And when you find those connections and when you find reasons to love your students, you're not going to let them down, even when they're having a bad day or you're having a bad day, you know? So absolutely, those connections are so important. And in light of what we're talking about, you know, going deep into those connections and really getting to the deep levels of culture, not just, you know, this is Black History Month, or this is, Christmas, or just kind of your general holidays, really going deep into, you know, why do families function the way they, you know, do? And why do they think the way they do? And what is it like going to a quinceañera or to this type of church? And really getting those deep connections to really understand your students. Taylor Gilly, I see you up next.
Yeah, I have a good story about this one. There was a time when I had a large population of Vietnamese students in my classroom, and I knew that the Lunar New Year was coming up. And so I was speaking with my culturally responsive mentor about the things that I was planning, and we were going to have sticky rice cakes and we were going to do all the cultural things. And he's like, yeah, that's good, babe, but have you asked them what they want to do to celebrate the Lunar New Year? So I had to check myself, because this isn't about Taylor. I'm not the sage on the stage. This isn't about my ultimate party planning skills. This is about what my Vietnamese students want to do and how they want to celebrate and bring their culture into the classroom. And I was wildly off base. They wanted to bring candy to trade with their classmates. Y'all, Valentine's Day was literally like 4 days away, and they still wanted to bring the candy and trade. They also voted to make red envelopes and put like good tidings, like positive notes for each other, because that's what they do at home when they can't fill their red envelopes with money. They put special notes for each other. And so I'm like, okay, we can do that. But my mentor, had I not been expressing this and had I just kept it to myself and decided that this is what I wanted to do, and I didn't give my students that voice, if he hadn't stopped me and reminded me, you need to ask your students what they want to do, I may have made a huge mistake. So making sure that you have that culturally responsive mentor. So when you are planning events in your classroom and you are planning during PLCs, you can make sure that you're keeping yourself in check, and that also, like we've said 100 times here already, that, you know, our students are, you know, they see themselves in the classroom, but also they have that voice. And I hope that that would be a Lunar New Year that they'll never forget, because it's one that I will always carry with me because of how special it turned out. Then it had nothing to do with Taylor Gilly. So it's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Taylor, for being vulnerable with us. That's very powerful. And I want to emphasize that came from a place of you wanting to celebrate and you wanting to bring in culture and you want to, you know, help kids and have this great moment. But how much more powerful and how much more meaningful was that for your students when someone pointed out, hey, why don't you talk to your students, see what they want to do? So I'm sure as that was very powerful for you in the moment, powerful for us now, it was very powerful for your students when it happened. So thank you for sharing that with us. Whenever we have the opportunity to, you know, plan with kids and have student leaders and bring them into the learning, do it. You have a ton of opportunity. You just have to make it happen. Marie?
So I think Brandy opened by talking a little bit about something that her professor had shared with her some time ago. And I have a similar situation in that I had a professor who shared with us, we had to create this timeline. And the timeline was our professional self and our personal self. And so when we're thinking about monitoring our personal bias and how that shows up, how do I behave privately? And how do I behave publicly? Because that shows up, right? It spills over into the classroom. And so we had to really think like, ooh, let me think about that. When I'm with my family, my people, how do I behave? And do I speak the same way I speak about others or about cultures the way I would in a classroom? So checking ourselves in that way, I think, was really critically important, especially when I had to put it on a timeline. Like, oh my gosh, I have to really think about that. And then the other piece is really aligning what I say with what I do, because kids pay attention to that. And then to triangulate that, what are the artifacts? If somebody were to come behind me, what could they find? What's my trail? How have I created that space in the classroom? And what's the evidence of that? So it's not just what I say, but it's my behavior, what I'm doing, and then the artifact piece as well, so that kids can begin to really believe in me, because I'm not just a talking head, right? And doing something else. It's all aligned. So really aligning ourselves, triangulating who we are and presenting that to our students. That's how I've learned how to check my bias.
What a great activity to do to self-reflect and to check your bias. I would like to speak more on that, but we're low on time and I want to make sure everyone's able to speak. So I'm going to sum that up with walk the walk and talk the talk. The next person I see up here is Monet.
So echoing Taylor and Marie, we have to be cognizant. And that goes for any setting. I reflect, when I was in the classroom, I never knew I could love another culture or care about another culture outside of my own than when I began teaching my ELs. And so just thinking about that, like, I just grew a love for them. And we have to check ourselves, just like Marie said. We have to be open to doing that daily, minute by minute, hour by hour, have those reflections. And in my opinion, that's me, it's what's wrong with much of our living today. I had to do that and learn, like Taylor, what they love, what they need, what they enjoy. And so many of these things can be extended beyond education, right? But in particular in education, we do not take measures to be self-aware. We are the adults, and we often get stuck on that idea that we don't have to conform to kids, but we are in the kid business. So, and being cognizant of learners or the learners that we have to know their needs and adapt for inclusivity. And I'll be short, but I can get preachy. This is the vehicle to achievement and top-notch instruction, inclusivity. And so again, if we as educators don't know the background of our students, or if we don't have a clear understanding, I think it's important to share and emphasize that educators and teachers alike need to be open and understanding to researching. I said that earlier, but research your kiddos, research their cultures, research the environment, research what you need. And like Taylor said, respectfully and respectively ask questions that are going to inform your teaching and your practices. And then be open to feedback from educational professionals that may look like your students or that may have shared the experiences of your students, and include that in your teaching. Include all of that often. I mean, we don't know everything, and I know as educators sometimes we think we do, but I'll say that change is okay. We have to humble ourselves and know that it's okay to still learn something and be learners even though we are seasoned educators. So just keeping those things in mind. Let me pull it back a little bit because I get passionate, I get excited.
No, that was beautifully said. You have to know your kids, you have to know yourself, and you have to make constant adjustments and be open to, just like how we ask kids to be open to fail, we have to be open to fail too, and that's okay. Thank you, Monet. And I see Tia.
Well, echoing the topic of research that Monet was just sharing, we all know that a part of research sometimes is joining the culture and the community so that you have a deeper understanding. And as educators, we have to be comfortable with coming into that culture, more than just facilitating it or structuring our classroom environment, our learning environments, but to join that culture and become, you need to reach a point of being satiated in that culture so that you can be responsible and responsive. There's an art and a science to teaching. There are technical elements, and then there are adaptive elements. And so we all talk about the technical pieces and the science of it, and looking at the data reports and how we respond to the data and data-driven instruction. But what really moves the students forward is the adaptive element. Are you understanding them? Are you hearing their voice? Are you giving them ownership of their voice? Are you responding to their voice and including that in the learning cycle so that they're able to connect to the learning? And so we have a responsibility to go beyond structuring and living that with them.
No, absolutely. And I liked how you said, getting involved in the community. I know that sometimes students feel like teachers don't have a life. We just stay in our classrooms, we sleep at the school, we don't watch movies or music or do anything, right? And I feel like sometimes teachers end up feeling that way about their kids too. They don't just go home and do homework. They're involved somewhere. There was someone to go catch them. There's a coach you could talk to. There's a parent you could talk to. There's a pastor, a preacher. There is someone you could talk to that knows this kid and knows this family and can give you some insight into connecting with them and learning their culture. And it's just going to make your life easier as a teacher. And like many of you shared, when you do those experiences, it's very valuable for us too, and powerful for us too, to learn about, different cultures and to meet people and to be involved in the community. So absolutely. I think that is everyone. So at this time, I am going to turn to Nicole to see if there's any audience questions.
So there is, and buckle up because this is going to be a good one and it's loaded. So I'm going to read it twice. This is a combination of two questions from Shannon Ayers and DeWanda Richard. So I've kind of combined those questions. So shout out to them. Hey. So how can we positively impact the practice of disproportionately placing students of color in alternative placements, specifically SPED or perhaps ISS, due to behavior issues or possibly issues like the inability to read on level if it wasn't culturally important as they were growing up? Do you know what I'm saying? So again, it was a merged question. So I'm going to read it again because it's a lot. So how can we positively impact the practice of disproportionately placing students of color in alternate placements such as SPED or ISS due to behavior issues or inabilities to do academic things that were not culturally important. Okay.
I
Soak
think
that in.
Tia had all 4 her hands up, so we gonna definitely go to Tia first. We gonna definitely go to Tia first. And ladies, as we end, thank you so much, audience, for those questions. That was powerful questions, and we're gonna address them. And so Tia will go ahead and start us off.
that is a pet peeve of mine. And it goes back to culture. And I was having a conversation with someone earlier and talking about the fact that, and I'll speak from my cultural perspective, we are a social people. And sometimes people outside of that socialization look at those behaviors as disruptive. When it's not disruptive, it is just the way that we communicate. And so it is critical that we remove our biases, that we stand back and understand all aspects of the situation prior to moving to discipline, placements, special education referrals due to behavior. If you have students sitting in special education due to behavior, there's a concern with the services at that school. Because there should have been some wraparound services. There should have been some social skills trainings. Where are your counselors? What staffing have you put in place to address this? And so we all know that the numbers don't lie. Minority students are disproportionately represented in special education and in discipline alternative centers, and sometimes for minor infractions that could have been redirected, if someone had taken just a moment to talk with that student. I think of a student that I had when I was working in a high school. I've always been in high school, but I think of a student who was constantly in what we would call trouble and was approaching a DAP placement for incorrigibility. And you know what the problem was? The student was living in the car with their family. The student was late to school every day because they had to wait for the gym to open so that they could take showers because mom could pay the $10 a month for the gym membership. And so it takes minutes to stop and speak with the student and hear what's going on, rather than moving on adults who have clearly not removed their biases. In the moment you are dealing with a child from your own perspective, when it's all about you've already lost the child in the battle for that child's success. And that's our responsibility. We are in this battling for their success and for their futures.
May I please jump in here?
Go right ahead, Shayna. Go right ahead.
Oh,
Thank
she's
you so
about
much
to take us to church.
Go ahead.
Because I mean, I'm very passionate about that. I think if we, let me see if I can sum it up. I think if we take the time to not view a child's disruptive behavior as, we're viewing them as disruptive as opposed to looking at that as a cry for help, right? We're looking at little Johnny gets on my nerves every day doing the same thing, and we view him as a disruption. You know, our kids lack social skills, let's be honest, right? So they won't come in and tell us, listen, I have this problem that's going on. They're going to act out until they get the attention that they need. So instead of us dooming them to hell, alternative school, instead of us saying that, you know, that's how we're going to help them, when we just push what we see to be a problem outside to another problem, meaning we place them in an environment of nothing but alternative kids who have nothing but issues, and we never dealt with the issue, then that kid is going to serve their time in alternative school and come back with what? The same issue. Let's learn the kid and deal with the child. So that's how we can prevent that disproportion. Is stop looking at that baby, looking at that kid as a problem. No, it's a cry for help. I had just I had a kid who had stolen a bookmark from the book, the fair, right? And the teacher the mentor teacher told me, oh, he's going to be in jail one day. And I said, not if I could help it. Why? Because he stole a bookmark? No, not if I could help it. So you know what? Hey, look at it positive. He wanted to read, right? You know, come on here. So we have to stop viewing these kids as problems. And then we have to deal with the problem that they are presenting to us. We have to look beyond what is presented and help them. But we're not giving them that help. That's what's going on today, right? We have to stop viewing them in a way that they don't need to be viewed. View them and give them the help that they need. So I'm gonna leave it there.
And you left it in a powerful place too. So, so go. Everybody, like hands are flying all over the place for this. So Marie, go up next, and I'm just following my screen around. Marie.
So both the two panelists who just spoken have been very articulate and really like passionate. I think the other piece that we really need to go back to, Akira, is your last question, right? About personal bias. So if I'm sending all these kids who do X, Y, Z, whatever that behavior happens to be, what is it about me that rubs me the wrong way when it's that kid and maybe not that kid, right? So how have I been conditioned unconsciously to view this behavior from this particular student population as, you're out, whereas others, it doesn't happen. So as educators, we need to be mindful of professional learning opportunities where we carefully construct questions that help us check ourselves so that we start to realize, man, when I look at my personal data on the kids that I'm sending out to the office or sending disproportionately, when I look at my work, this is how I am interacting. And what is it about what's happened to me, what's in my context that has shaped the way I see this particular student population? I think that is really, really, really important for us to provide the space, not an accusatory, you wrong, you not handling these kids the right way. But we as educators need to be very skillful in the way that we structure conversations and questions to help educators self-reflect. As a constructivist, I don't want somebody telling me what I didn't do. Show me the way, right? Show me myself, and then I can do something about that with the right supports.
Yeah, and you're talking action right now. I mean, that's definitely actionable, right? When we talk about attending PD, like Taylor said, talking to those mentors, finding out ways for you to learn who you are and what your biases are, right? Because none of us want to be told. None of us want to be told, you got this problem kind of thing. But if we could be guided down there to help us see that the way you're viewing these kids, the way you're viewing their behavior might not be the only way there is to view their behavior, might not be the only way. All right, so we're gonna go Brandy next.
I love what you said, Marie, just really checking yourself. And the question, is prompting us to talk about positive ways to educate colleagues on how to manage students and relationships in their classrooms. And so I definitely will say that there has to be a shift in the mindset. You have to understand that you have to have a growth mindset, and your mindset predicates which words you use. I have to do this, or I get the opportunity to. And so when you're talking to students, didn't I tell you versus, can you tell me what you heard me say? Is that what you're doing right now? Okay, so when are you going to shift your behavior? Or remember the contract we signed? Can you look up there and I'll come back to you and see if you can let me know what you did differently or what you need to. Just creating a space where kids do not lose their dignity. And you, educator, are not taking it personal. You cannot take it personal. That's the wrong thing to do. We can educate our colleagues on how tone and body language can change the type of conversation that you have or an interaction with a student or even one of your teammates. So it is about those unspoken rules that are a part of a culture, and you understanding how impactful it is whenever you don't have that mutual respect and maintain dignity. I think Monique was talking about, I'm the teacher, you listen to what I say, reflect. School is a learning institution. Everybody gets to learn. And if you're not a lifelong learner, then you're not checking yourself. You're not looking at your discipline data and saying, wait a minute, okay, I need to do something different. And that's all very important. I know we are asked to be professional and we have responsibilities, but we all know that our personal selves shift into professional selves. And so your personal self is your basis, and you have to make sure that you are actively paying attention to your tone, to your word choice, to your mindset. Do you believe that this child can pass, even though she comes to class late 20 minutes every day and out of dress code all the time? Don't take it personal, just address it.
Excellent, excellent. Well said, Brandy. So I know we have a couple more hands up. Monet, Nicole, Taylor. Nicole, I'll come to you last so you can round us off and close us out on this part. But I'll say this. I know that we are going past our time. I'm not fighting it. It is what it is. We're right now talking to the people in the back. Right now we're going to just hang on and keep with this because this is an important question. And people want to know this. They want to know, okay, how do I do this? You're talking about culture, you're talking about student biography, but how do I do it? And we are giving answers now, and we're all learning as we're having this conversation. So Monet, go ahead to you.
So ladies, you are just spot on. When our kids come to us, they come to us with they show up to us with all kinds of holes in their learning, right? All kids show up to us with issues and with just gaps in learning, gaps in behavior. But the lack of cultural awareness and cultural sensitivity yields it to certain teachers problem solving in the way that they do. So while every shade of student can be disruptive at any given time or not be a proficient or fluent reader, the lack of that cultural awareness of my scholars, of my students, and that cultural sensitivity pushes you to problem solve where, okay, this student is a special education student, or this student is a whatever student, as opposed to you taking the time to point that appropriate finger at yourself and say, okay, I need to self-reflect. I need to figure out where is the student coming from? What are their cultural norms? And then how can I meet them where they are? So they aren't reading. It isn't that they can't read. Maybe you don't have a text. Someone mentioned about bookshelf. I think Taylor. You don't have a text in the classroom that they can relate to, that's on their level. That's something that they can call their own. Or you aren't teaching in a manner. Maybe your tone is too aggressive or abrasive. And so I wrote this down earlier but this has to be a value of the educator. And so while we're saying great things for teachers to consider, I can't force you to be culturally sound, culturally aware, culturally sensitive. I can't force or make you to want to, move mountains for this kid or to consider their needs. You have to one day, and that goes with our world, like you really have to check yourself, humble yourself, reach deep down in your soul and say, okay, this is wrong. I'm not doing right by kids. We're not doing right by kids. We are not servicing kids. The system is wrong. The laws are wrong. The whatever is wrong. And I want to try to do my level best. Me, one person can change the world, can change the school, and then other teachers are like, Miss, I had a kid. His name was Angel. That baby was everything but his name. But I didn't label him as the person that I knew he was. I gave him a chance. Little old small short me, I gave him a chance. And I did, and I advocated for him, and I did what was necessary for him. I didn't just say, okay, he curses, he uses profanity, he doesn't read well, he talks back, like send him to EC or send him to the office. Like I learned him, I studied him and what he needed, and I cultivated him, and I moved my lessons to support his needs and the needs of kids like him. And then other teachers are like, well, why is he not skipping your class? Why does he show up on time? And they're listening now, that mentor, like Taylor mentioned. Now they want to know, what are you doing? How can I emulate that in my classroom? And it becomes a trickle-in effect. But someone has to step out on faith, step out and just try it. And then other teachers have to want to do. Let me stop.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So I know these hands keep coming up some more. So y'all gonna quit. But no, this is excellent discussion. And the truth of the matter is, we could obviously go on all evening having this conversation. Let's go ahead and take 2 more hands, and then we're gonna go ahead and get ready to close out. All right. So I think we're going to Taylor next.
Yeah. The research is showing right now that a first-year teacher will leave their post within 5 years of starting in urban, diverse, high-need schools. And folks, they're not just leaving that school, they are leaving the profession because they feel that they've made a bad career choice, when in actuality, they just weren't ready for their environment. So we here as a panel, I would venture a guess, if you're watching this right now, you're doing something because you want to be better in your craft and you want to serve students better. But we also have to take a look at, how are we serving our new teachers in our world of our alternative certification, in our world of, a traditional university student who did student teaching in the suburban affluent environment. How are we serving those teachers who are coming in, and what opportunities are we giving them to become those culturally responsive educators? Because I would, say that probably 90% of the time, deep down, they just want to do right by their students. They just don't know how. I used to not know how to speak to my Black boys in my classroom. If it weren't for my mentor, who I will forever be in his debt, Corey Neblett, if it weren't for him actually modeling how to have these student conversations with my disruptive students, if it weren't for him taking my hand and saying, you are a good teacher, we need to change a few things that you're doing, and you're going to be a great teacher. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be right here right now. I would have left after my first year. At Christmas time, I was ready to go. I cried every week, but I had him constantly backing me up. So if you're watching this right now, think about the teachers that you work with, and how can you open yourself up to be that for someone else? I'm constantly grateful for the women who hold me up in this profession, and for the women who help support me, and to the Monet and to the Marie that I can go to with these silly questions like, oh, I'm gonna make myself look bad right now, but I need to ask you this. Can you please help me? How can you be that for someone else? Because I am so forever grateful. And if we can just lock into that interpersonal relationship with our colleagues, I feel like we could stop the teacher turnover. And then, that has staying power in schools. And that shows commitment to students. The students see that you are committed to the school and the community. And then that opens that trust barrier. And then you actually build, a school culture that this is here and this is what we do. And I'm supporting you and you're supporting me and we're all supporting each other. And that turnover stops. And then I think, because once we get to the DAP placement, once we get to the referrals, once we get to the suspensions, it's too late. We've already done a disservice. So I think if we could open ourselves up to our fellow teachers to show them the way, I think that's the root of it.
Yeah. Well said, Taylor. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to throw this in there. And this is not the kind of line you're supposed to throw in and walk away, but I'm going to do it because we're on a time situation. But what you just said is not just a white teacher thing. So I just want to be very, very clear about that. What you just said goes across all ethnicities and all races, because we all can do better with being culturally cognizant, culturally knowledgeable, culturally relevant, and certainly culturally responsive. So thank you so much for that. All right. Tia, did your hand go up on purpose?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so Tia, then Nicole is gonna close us. All right.
Just two really quick things back to something that Monet said and something that Taylor just shared. No, you cannot force teachers to be culturally responsive or culturally respective, but I would encourage teachers to look to leadership in their building, and even if it's the teacher next door, but look to leaders who understand their responsibility to shape campus-wide culture, and that they have the, and I keep coming back to responsibility, they have the responsibility to help teachers who are not handling students in these ways. They have the responsibility to help them understand that I can change your behaviors faster than I can change your beliefs. And so, no, you cannot make the teacher do anything, but you can change their behavior faster than you can change their beliefs. The other thing that I want to say, just a thought, is that demographics do not determine destination. And every student who enters your classroom, and we're talking a lot about the urban campuses, their demographics do not determine their destination. And so that goes back to the advocacy that I keep mentioning tonight, and our responsibility to keep those students reminded that there is hope for their future, and they do have the power to speak into their future, and they do have the power to take action to guide their decisions. I've worked in schools where we had real gangs, not somebody who wanted to be in the gang, true gangs. And I had relationships with those gang leaders, and I would pull them in and talk to them about their leadership skills. Anytime you can cause a campus-wide disruption at the finger, your text messaging, that's leadership. And so you have to, as the teacher, embrace those very students and give them a redirected energy for that leadership or whatever that talent is that they display that keeps them from being the student that you know they can be. Just help them to redirect it into a more positive manner. Your demographics do not determine your destination.
Come on now. Come through. All right. Excellent. Excellent. I want to highlight that leadership. It doesn't matter if that leadership is coming off in a way that we don't yet want it to come off. It is no doubt still leadership. And we as the educators can help to redirect that and put it on a trajectory that's going to equal success for our kids. All right. So with that, Jamie, I see your hand. We want to go to Nicole. Jamie, you got a one-liner in there? Go ahead.
Like 3, it's not as fancy as what Tia said, but we've all kind of said you can't force teachers to want to do this, right? But you can inspire and you can lead by example. My very first year teaching, a teacher wanted to teach, in fact, Kira wanted to teach Things Fall Apart. And I love reading. That was the only book I hated in high school. Hated it, had an awful experience. And Kira was like, we're going to do differently than what your teacher did. Like, my kids love it, we're going to do it. And I trusted her because she seemed really passionate and excited about it. And when I tell you that was my kid's favorite book, hands down. And we acted out scenes in class and we made it come alive in class, and it was beautiful. And I went from, do we have to do this? Like, I hated this as a teenager, to, I can't wait till we get to the end of the year when we can do this. So you can definitely inspire by example. You know, if you're happy and enjoying teaching, and those of you, you know, teaching next to you are not, they're going to ask you questions. They're going to feel like, why is she so happy? Why does she like doing this? So I just wanted to, you can't force, but you can definitely inspire.
Beautiful. Inspire, influence, motivate, encourage. But like Tia said, we could also change behaviors. Okay. So all right. So I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, who is going to do the highlight reel segment for us, I believe. Is that right, Miss Nicole?
I am, but I'm selfishly going to throw in a 2-3 liner because I got the mic. So I just wanted to say that, you know, all of us, you guys had so many great things to say. And, you know, every one of us had an angel, is what Monet called it, you know, and Marie, you know, referred to a fill in the blank kid earlier, you know, and we all had those. And what I love about that is everything you just said, all these answers tie into what we're talking about. It's building that culture in the classroom to, you know, when I would get the kid that was kicked out of 2 other English classes because those teachers didn't want to do with them, I was like, bet, watch this, challenge accepted. And those were the kids that I was more proud of anything. Like, yeah, my kids, oh, they got masters on this, or they passed their STAR test, but this kid hasn't gone to SAC in a week, or this kid, you know, is becoming a better person, or what. Like, those are the kids that I was like, oh, you didn't want him? I got you, you know, and those are the moments that we live to remember. And, you know, I'll never forget, I'm quick, I promise, Akira, one of my kids, one of those kids made a big mistake. He was incarcerated while he was one of my students. And I was disappointed, very disappointed, but you know what? Nobody was more disappointed than that 4th period English class, because we were all a family in that class. So what did we do? Every single kid in that class wrote that kid a letter, and I took it to him. Better believe he hasn't been back in jail since he got out, because he knew he had us behind him. Even if he felt like he didn't have someone else somewhere else, he had us. And so you can keep kicking those kids out of your class, because he's going to take English twice today. He knows he's not coming to sit in the back of my class. He's going to get this twice, and they'll be better people for it. And so if we could make that part of our culture, to not think that those kids are the ones we want out, but to understand we'll be better to embrace those kids because they make us better educators, you know? So, okay, I know that's too long, but I just wanted to throw that in there because you guys all, you know, had these great stories of those kids, you know? So anyway,
So
let's go to the highlight reel.
I'm gonna bring us to the highlight reel. I know I'm not the only one whose eyes started kind of watering a little bit when she was telling that story. I know I'm not. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute now. And let's go to the highlight.
All right. All right. So we had a lot to say. Obviously, this was a jam-packed discussion, but some of the things that I highlighted for us to take away from this session are that we understand about culture, and that a child will understand when you relate to them, that it's their opportunity to let go, become vulnerable, and allow themselves to open up and ultimately learn, which is what they are there to do. We talked about education being a vulnerable sport. Such a small, short sentence that has so much deep meaning behind it. We must be cognizant that culture does exist and learn that culture is not, learning culture of our students isn't deviating away from content, because we're teaching students, not subjects. Another thing is we talked about not only is it important to create a student-centered learning environment, but to forge ahead, set high expectations, and get that into a student-led environment where we're putting success, we're speaking it into existence so that it comes to fruition for not just the kids that we think can be successful, but for all of our kids, even the ones that we may have been sent to that others doubted, right? So speaking that success into existence, raising the bar, and allowing them to meet it and hopefully succeed. Child You Better series today was awesome. You guys had a lot of great things to say, and we had a lot of loves and likes coming across the screen with a lot of what you guys said. And then moving on to our last question, just some recaps. We need to align who we are and what we do and make sure that we eliminate any bias in the classroom. And when we eliminate bias and we put systems in place that redirect issues like behavior issues, instead of, you know, considering those alternative placements as our first go-to, then hopefully we can be more successful in eliminating that bias. And the last one-liner that came in the chat that I always love seeing this is to remember to praise publicly and punish privately. It's, again, one of those small sentences that means so much. And that goes back to one more statement from the beginning that I love, which is that if you ever catch yourself saying anything about being your class, this is my class, catch yourself, because it's our class, not my class. So that's a wrap.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was an excellent highlight reel. I feel like somehow you managed to capture everything that was said. So that was absolutely awesome. And so at this time, I want to go ahead and close us out by thanking our tremendous panelists for being here today. Give yourselves a round of applause. Oh my goodness, I don't know why I thought we would just be an hour. So you guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise and your learning. Thank you to our audience out there, whether you are viewing it live or you're viewing this later on down the road as a recording. Thank you for taking the time to make this important. Thank you for taking the time to want to learn more, to want to be better, and to grow with us, because everyone on this panel is a lifelong learner. We are none of us finished, a finished work. We are all still growing in our craft as well as in our lives. And so we thank you so much, audience members, for participating, for being there, for the questions, the loves, the likes, the comments, all of it. We thank you so much. We do want you to tune in next Saturday next month for our October panel. That is on Saturday, October 24th, same time, same bat time, same bat place at 5:30 p.m. on the 7 Traits of Talented Teachers page. No registration necessary for everyone who's been asking. All you got to do is tune into the 7 Traits of Talented Teacher page, and here we will be waiting for you, waiting to serve you. And so again, thank you so much. Until next time, this is your Ancestors of Pedagogical Greatness host, Kira, and your co-host, Jamie, and your chat moderator, Nicole, saying,
Keep teaching.
Keep learning.
and keep growing. Have a good one, everybody. Woo!
Bye.